Good evening. My name is Mike Morris. I'm co-director of Writing on the Wall. Welcome to the Writers Block, which is Writing on the Wall's online writing centre. And tonight, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Kevin Dyer, who is going to be our writer on the block for the next couple of weeks. Kevin's going to be doing a whole series of events, and I'll fill you in on all of those at the end of tonight's session. To introduce Kevin, could take a long time actually, because he is an extremely prolific writer and has won a whole number of major awards. He's a playwright, but also a multi-form writer who writes across different genres, and some of which we might touch on in the discussion. He's the associate writer at Action Transport Theatre, artistic associate at Farnham Maltings. He's written over 60 commissioned plays, many of which, as I said, have been shortlisted or have won major prizes. He won the most inspiring international playwright award at ASITAGE at the World Congress of Cape Town. He was the winner of the UK Theatre Awards, Best Production for his adaptation of The Hobbit. Winner of the Writers Guild of Great Britain for his play for children and young people. And he's twice winner of the Alwyn Weinmark Award. 3 of his plays are published by Aurora Metro. The Monster Under the Bed was selected by the Kennedy Center Washington as one of their best 25 plays over the last 25 years. And in the best 50 plays for young people, he has 3 plays: Monster Under the Bed, Hidden, and The Bomb. He writes plays for children, young people, and adults. He's interested in visual theatre, well-crafted plays, frequently as a dramaturge, and has addressed the Canadian Society of Dramaturge. And he is currently commissioned to write 4 plays and is one of the leaders of Storm in the North. And during lockdown, very early on, something which we hopefully will talk about, he was commissioned to write a play called The Girl, Her Mum and a Raccoon with No Name, a specially commissioned video, which is available on YouTube at the moment. And I have to say, I've read and watched a couple of Kevin's work over the last couple of days. I would highly recommend watching them. Absolutely outstanding work. Very entertaining, very engaging, and gives you some idea of why he is so acclaimed. So Kevin, thanks so much for agreeing to be our writer on the block. It's fantastic to meet you. Welcome to Writing on the Wall.
Thank you. Thank you for your generosity and your hospitality. Thank you.
No problem whatsoever. So I think you're going to be quite busy over the next couple of weeks, hopefully, with a whole series of events, which we're looking forward to. And you are, as we were talking before, you are the first playwright that we've had for our writer on the block, which offers something quite new and unique to our audiences in a city with so many great theatres and so much amazing, kind of theatre production over the years. First off, let's ask you, what do you hope to bring to this residency?
Well, it's great being the first playwright. I really believe in plays. I remember when I sort of saw my first play, and that's why I'm a playwright. I just remember how exciting it was and how I saw this thing and I thought, that's what I want to do. I didn't even know what that meant. I just knew that live event was a bit special. It's taken me a long time to work out how it worked. But I think, what am I going to do? I'm going to talk to lots of writers about their plays. And I think we'll talk about how plays work and how we try and not write bad plays. But we might talk about politics and people and characters and scenes and structure and all those things. Okay,
well, that's interesting. So you said your first play that you saw kind of was a transformative moment for you. Do you mind me asking how old you were when that was?
Well, I know I went to a pantomime when I was young, but I hated it, and I cried on the bus going and cried on the bus going back. I can't remember anything about it. But it's when I was at school and we went to see Waiting for Godot by an amateur theatre company, and I was about 15. Oh, wow. I'd never seen a play before then. I was 15, I think.
Yeah.
And I saw Lucky being dragged along with a rope around his neck, and I just thought, this isn't the sort of TV that my mum and dad watch. It's not It's not like any of that stuff. It's not Crossroads. I like this.
I mean, and that is, as a play, I mean, obviously that is, right up there with one of the best. I saw an incredible production of that with Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart down in London. And it was mind blowing. And it's one that I've read many, many, many times, actually. And actually, interesting, if I was thinking about this when I was watching the Girl in the Raccoon play, and also read about the monster under the bed. I'm thinking about that thing about how do you make things work, with maybe even one actor in the main, in the one on YouTube that you did for lockdown, but make it work in a very limited space with very few voices in there.
I think we have to connect, don't we? We have to, I think as actors, if they have to somehow get through that fourth wall to the people who are watching and listening. And the right, sometimes the design helps as well. But it's about, in the end, we want to watch people who are interested in. We want to watch people who connect with their own lives. Like one of my favorite plays is King Lear. I'm not going to be a king. I'm never going to be the daughter of a king. But the situation that Cordelia is in it means something to me when I watch it in a good production. I think it's right. It has to mean something.
I mean, you say that you don't write for screen. You're very interested in the impact of the now in terms of theatre. It seems to me, I don't know what your thoughts are, that theatre, because of that live element, whether you directly break the fourth wall in terms of addressing the audience or not, but that live element, it can be transformative in ways that the screen, in a sense, can't necessarily be. I've said this to friends sometimes, if you go to see a bad film, you tend to, it's going to go on whether you like it or not. You tend to sit through. Whereas if you see a play that for some reason, you react against, you see people walk out of theatres. You very see people, I know that's almost taking a negative connotation on what you're saying, but you don't see people walk out of cinemas quite often in the same way, do you?
Well, I think theatre often isn't as good as cinema. That's just a fact. I think a lot of theatre plays go on, and when they're not ready, we as playwrights and dramaturgs and directors, we haven't got them ready.
Yeah.
And we're asking people to come and see work that's not ready. And we're just being a bit lazy there.
Well, to turn that on its head, that was a negative approach to it in a sense, but it was that thing about, when you see something live in front of you that really, really grips you, that no matter how good the film can sometimes have a greater effect.
Yes, because I think we have to remember as writers is that in theatre, it's happening now. It is happening now. The action is now in front of us. It's not like sometimes if you write a piece of prose or a novel, it can be in past tense. A play at its best is never in the past tense. It's only in the present tense. And I am there in the audience experiencing it happening now and worrying about the future of the character in front of me. I think that's what's going on. I'm worrying about whoever it is in front of me. Will they be safe? Will they be okay?
So you're inspired by seeing Waiting for Godot, but that's quite a journey then into, becoming the playwright that you are. Do you mind just telling us something about your background?
I never thought that I could be a playwright because I didn't know such things existed. I think that's why I quite like working with children now, just to tell them that there are different possibilities out there apart from what your mum and dad do. But I never knew you could be a writer. When I was about 9, a teacher of mine typed up a story that I'd written. This is Mr. Fox. I didn't know it was an important moment, but Mr. Fox typed up a story and gave it back to me. Wow. And later on, I realized that was important, and just somebody told me that I could do it. I found the story many years later. It's not very good, but that's irrelevant. This man gave me permission to do it. And that's happened increasingly through my life. I say my parents weren't arty people. We didn't have books. We didn't go to the theatre. We didn't go to galleries.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I worked out pretty early on that poetry and plays allowed me to be who I am.
Yeah. Do you think, because I mean, this is something that's been, you know, is a lot of discussion within the art, particularly over the last couple of years. Do you think, you know, the coming from the background that you're describing, maybe, you know, more working class background, do you think that that presents an extra challenge in that sense of, you know, an understanding and expectation in that sense, and knowledge that there are things like, you know, playwrights, etc. out there?
Of course, it's about who you see, isn't it? Like I still don't send plays to Liverpool, to London, or sometimes to a lot of big theatres, because in my head I've still got that working class boy's head, which thinks they don't want me. Honestly, they don't want me. Yeah. And I know people now. I know quite a lot of people who are famous and all that sort of thing. And it's interesting because their kids are doing fantastically well, because they've lived in houses where there are directors and where there are writers and where there are composers that come into the house all the time.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, the people that come into their house are the rent collector. Mm. That's who comes in. But if you have somebody coming into your house who's a composer, it just gives you a different window, doesn't it? So it is fantastic that there are so many organizations in the UK now opening the doors. It is happening. It really is happening.
It feels like it's happening, doesn't it? That, you know, those, I mean, the difficulty is still almost the, you know, the pathways to get into it, because obviously if you come from a more middle class background, you know, the financial support may, you know, there may be more there for you. So, or, you know, the pathways are opening up, but if, you know, to, you know, something you're going to talk about at some point is that thing about, you know, how do you move then into actually being able to make a living?
Yeah, that's right. And of course, I don't think I am working class anymore. I'm passionate about class and how it operates within societies and how it operates across culture, through gender and through colour, as well as in terms of money, and as well as through aspirations.
Is this something you tend to in your plays? Is it something that you consciously deal with in your plays, or do you just think it's part of the makeup of, you know, how you might approach or things be expressed in your work?
Once I started going to theatre, me and some mates, we used to go to the Birmingham Rep, and we used to go to their first nights because you could get into a first night for half price. And I realized then there were two sorts of theatre. In the studio, there was David Edgar, who was writing plays about real people. But on the main stage, that was still the time when people were doing George Bernard Shaw. Right. So 95% of the plays on the main stage had chaiselongs and French windows. Oddly enough, I now own a chaiselong, but actually, when I was young, I couldn't even say the word. I don't even know if I still do. But French windows, I didn't know anybody who had French windows, but all the plays on the main stage had French windows. And in those days, in the plays, everybody stood up. Well, actually, they sat on the chaiselong or they stood up like that.
Yeah.
And I knew at some point I wanted to make plays where the performers don't just sit on a chaiselong or stand in front of the French windows.
How did you then progress? So, you know, you start out from the background that you talk about, you're inspired, you know, you think this is what I want to do. Just take us on that journey a little bit as to.
I think I knew I wanted to write, but the only writer I could think of becoming was being a newspaper journalist, because that's the only thing I could think of. Later on, yeah. I did become a newspaper journalist and photographer. I did that, but I went to university. I was one of those people who were the first people in their family to go to uni. I did that. I spent all my time at university playing football. That's what I did, because what else was university for?
Yeah.
But while I was there, I took part in an amateur production of something. I was in university in Scotland, and they did an English play. They did, the one with Willie Mossopin. What's it called? I can't remember. But I was English, you see. So I was English. I was in Scotland. They needed somebody who was English, so I got the part. Best bit of casting ever for me.
Yeah.
So I was tickling away. I was itching away at this theatre thing. I left university. I worked on newspapers. I worked on magazines, and then I went to do a postgraduate theatre course, and I worked as an actor. So I worked as an actor in theatre and in television. But increasingly, as an actor, I felt uncreative. So I started working in theatre companies where we devised our own work, and I started to take on this role of making up the stories. That's what happened, because I found making up stories was a creative thing that I found exciting and fun. And that's what I do now, isn't it? I make up stories.
You said that in the video that you did for us for the introduction, you said that your first plays were terrible at the start. Tell us about, because there's the learning right there, I suppose, isn't it? How did you realize they were terrible? Was it in the writing, or were any of these put on or workshopped? And the
first ones weren't put on. They were just me writing at home on my own, and I knew they were terrible. I just knew they weren't about anything. I didn't know anything about it. It's like trying to build a house if you don't know how to lay bricks.
Yeah, I've seen some of them on Grand Designs, these ideas that people have that inevitably bankrupt them and split their marriages up.
And I think when it hit me was I was working with a theatre company in Cardiff, and we made a play and we toured it around Wales. And the man who was head of South Wales Arts, who supported our work, and he helped us get funding, and he was fantastically supportive, this man. And we saw one show, and he said, "It's easy in an aeroplane to take off. It's very easy for it to fly, but it's really difficult to land it." And I thought, oh, he's just telling me that the ending is crap, isn't he? That's what he's telling me. So I started to think about how to end stories properly. And it still bugs me. I still work really hard on the ending of plays.
It reminds me of that phrase, it's very easy to get a lot of people on the stage. It's not so easy to get them all off.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
So, okay, so you got that advice, and, because I'm just partly the reason I'm kind of pushing this, because one of the purposes, if not the main purpose of the writer's block, is it is to be able to, take the writer's experience for the people who are going to be tuning into this, and obviously the other events of the writer's block. One thing that we're very passionate about writing on the wall is obviously engaging people and in an active process of writing, and getting them kind of to understand the process, to strip away, if you like, some of the mystery as well, in a certain sense. So you then said that, well, something clicked in your head and you thought, I need to learn how to do this better. You did the postgraduate in that. Was that something that helped, or was it actually the writing itself and really beginning to weigh up yourself, if you like, on the page, that helped you to because you say you can learn this craft. It's a craft that you can learn, and that's a much debated thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Some people can just do it, can't they? Some people can. I don't know whether Arthur Miller went to writing classes or to university. I've never read his biography, although people say it's fantastic. But the man knows how to write a play. Although I've directed his plays, and I've cut material out of it, just to let you know. I cut 30 pages out of one. You know what I mean? But but I think that's because fashions have changed a little bit in theatre. We want to listen less generally.
Yeah, yeah,
and we want to see more.
yeah. I think that's. I mean, it is a fantastic. The biographies and autobiographies are amazing. I don't remember reading that he ever particularly went to classes either in a certain sense. But you're right. Your styles have changed. But for you then, in terms of addressing this, was there a point where you suddenly began to feel, okay, I'm now beginning to get a little bit of a handle upon this? Was there a particular play, maybe a particular experience? You did say just one thing there where you said the early stuff. You said it wasn't about anything. There's that thing about finding a voice, which I suppose is finding what you want to say. Was there a moment, or was this? I don't mean just necessarily one light bulb moment, but as part of that process, how did this begin to make sense to you?
I think one thing I know is that we go to lots of lessons in our lives. At school, we go to lots. If only we could learn one thing in each lesson, we'd have quite a lot of stuff up here. No, I just try and continue to learn. I wasn't a very good learner. I was a young, arrogant male, and I was only interested in doing what I wanted to do. But I think I've got better now at just trying to listen to something or listen to somebody and trying to get the one thing that'll help me, or that seems to be a truth. And one important moment for me was I was in a play. We'd written a play. We'd made our own company, and we were performing at a tiny little fringe theatre in London. And John Godber came along.
Wow.
And I didn't really know John Godber, but I know at the end of one of the shows, he came up and he talked about the piece. He talked about it as if it was worth it. And he talked to me about hooks, about how you end a scene, about end a scene with a hook and make sure that it pulls the audience into the next place. And I often remember that. I think, oh yeah, okay, John, I'll just try and end the scene properly so the audience stay with me for the next one.
I was reading, there's a fabulous book about the Russian short story writers by George Saunders, the Booker Prize winner. And he has the short stories, then he writes about them. It comes from his teaching of them. And he talks about how they escalate all of the time, which reminds me of, what your point there reminded me of that in a certain sense. How do you draw people from, one part of the play onwards? Do you think that's one of the biggest challenges that sometimes people have?
Yeah, well, I remember reading Noughts and Crosses by Mallory Blackman, and I just kept saying to myself, this woman's a playwright. She's a playwright, because she just knows how to make you turn the page. She knows how to make you stay with the characters through action, desperate for the next bit. And she's talking about something that's really, really important. But I'm more interested in the characters and finding out if they're going to be okay and what's going to happen than in the great big story thing. It's like she was making my brain do two things at once. Follow the characters, think about color in the world that we live in. She was doing both those things. And I was really disappointed when the National decided to do it, because I thought I was going to get to do an adaptation of Noughts and Crosses.
Did you get to see the?
No, I never have. But one day I will, I hope.
Maybe not. You might get called in one day. So you mentioned there about the characters, scene. There's also obviously structure and all of those things. And you mentioned being very interested in the characters there. How do you find your way in? I mean, and does it change? Is it characters, etc.? How do you find your way into what you write?
It all depends. I think sometimes we don't know our own process. But I try and work out what I'm doing, because if I know what I'm doing, what I'm trying to do, I've got a chance of achieving it. I think in my early terrible plays, people kept saying, the plot's terrible. The plot is terrible. So I have tried to work on plot and story. That's where I put a lot of my energy. I didn't really, some of the times the words we use, we don't quite know what they mean. But I was doing a workshop with young writers in a library in Cheshire, and we were talking about this. And a young girl, she said to me, "Oh, plot is what writers do to tell the story, isn't it?" And she said to me, "It's a verb, isn't it? It's a verb." And I thought, "Oh yeah, it is. Plot's a verb." And that might not work for everybody, but it works for me.
It makes sense.
It means I have to actively control the story. That's my job.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, to be specific, I mean, take, say, which we may or may not read a bit from tonight, but the man who left is not the man who came home. Now, I know that was based on a lot of interviews with widows of servicemen, who and the impact on their families. Something like that, for example. How well, I suppose that's a very interesting thing, isn't it? This is one, where you've done a lot of interviews, etc. How do you how with a play like that, where's the moment where you begin to feel you have something that's beginning to suggest a story or structure? Because I mean, the interesting structure on that is you actually have gaps where live in the theatre, one of the widows will speak as part of the play. So how do you, I suppose, going back to the early question, how do you find your way into something like that, just to be maybe practical for a moment?
What's the job? The job is find the story. That's the first bit. And then tell it irresistibly. That's the job, I think. With that play, The Man Who Left Is Not the Man Who Came Home, it started off called Mr. and Mrs. Macbeth.
Oh, interesting.
I wanted to write a play about what happens in the family when there's a man at war. So what's it like? I wanted to write a little domestic play about Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. And I thought there was going to be a sofa in it. And I thought it was going to be in their kitchen. And it was going to be about how it was going to be what's all the stuff that comes up when he's at war and she's at home. And to help I wrote this play, and I used not only Shakespeare's scenes, but I wrote all the other scenes, and I wrote them all in iambic pentameters. And so it was if you like, it was an Elizabethan play about being a military wife. But in the course of it, I started talking to real military wives now living in Britain, whose partners had been to Afghanistan and Iraq. Well, actually, and also the Falklands and in the Korean War. But it became to me that I needed to tell the story about now, about these women who are living now and what it's like to live with a squaddie. So I thought, oh, that's the area that I'm in. And then with all my notes, I had to go, okay, what are the little bits of action that I'm going to put on the stage? Oh, I'm going to put a bit on the stage when he's packed his bag, ready to go, and he brings it and he leaves it in the living room. That's a scene. So what I do is I start, it's a bit like storyboarding, like making an animation. I try and imagine all the pictures that are going to make the eventual picture that I'm going to tell the story. I find it interesting that Tracy Emin, the artist, she says that she thinks in words, but of course she makes visual art. And for me, I write with words, but I have to see the pictures. And then all I do is write the pictures. That's what I think I do. But I have to find the story first and then tell it.
One is you say, obviously, to tell it irresistibly, but you also say, what's the job? So, because I think, quite often, writing can seem quite mysterious to people. Where do you get that inspiration from? Is that light bulb moment where everything comes before you type of thing? But you describe it as what's the job. And I have to say, You know, as I said earlier, a very prolific writer. You know, I mean, that's 60 commission plays, and obviously a whole bunch of other work and you know, other material that you may be working on. So that kind of phrase of a job, there is a thing about getting on with the job, I suppose, isn't there? In a certain sense. And the other thing is, I mean, you can't preempt it there. We're talking about writing and theatre, and actually, I suppose referring back to Arthur Miller, theatre, you know, as a writer, it seems a very wordy type of thing. But what you're saying is you see it very visually, in a sense. And does that push you to pare back your work to let other things take place in a certain sense, or are you a bit of an overwriter and it takes quite a while to chip away?
I think that the process of unwriting is a really important part of the process, that taking stuff out. I was talking to somebody this afternoon. I was talking to Ginny Manning, who's a friend of mine and a writer and a dramaturg. Yeah. And she was giving me some feedback on a piece of my work, and she was just saying, I don't think we need that. I don't think we need that. And the bit of my head was going, shut up, Ginny, shut up. Of course I need it. Of course I need it. But of course, we don't need a lot of it, do we? Because when we go to the theatre, what's the bit that we love the best? It's the subtext. It's the bit that isn't said. So I have to make just enough scaffolding so the audience are going, oh, what's really going on? What's the bit that they're not saying? That's, I think, the interesting part for a lot of it.
And well, I suppose in a way, there is the power and the success if you're sparking an inner monologue in people, all of that tension, as you said before, of what's going to happen to this kind of character. Is one character really picking up on the cues of not of the other actor, but in terms of their characters of what's actually happening? Then you know you've really got something. I mean, the worst plays I've seen are ones where people are just, you know, filling every space, talking all the time, and you know, it feels like a bit of an assault at times when that happens. So it's quite a challenge then, really, to allow that space. And with theatre, I mean, it's no matter collaborative medium, isn't it? And I suppose as a writer, you have to put faith in a lot of other people, and I suppose they do maybe with yourself as well.
Yeah, I know it's tricky, isn't it? Because sometimes it is really collaborative. I work with Nina Hajiani at Action Transport, and you know, at her best in the rehearsal space, it's great. I'm stealing bits of her job as director, and she's stealing bits of my job as writer, and it makes something better. At its best.
At its best, yeah.
But I think I can always tell. I sometimes look at Carol Churchill's plays, and there are virtually no stage directions, and I think, yeah, that's because she's working at the National and she's got those fantastic actors. You know, if you're working with a company and if you don't trust your director, you don't trust your actors, that's when we as writers we say where the actors have to stand, and we tell them how to write the lines, and we tell them the color of their trousers. You know, that's when we're not trusting enough to the process, I think.
And you mentioned that actually, and I know it's going to come up in one of the workshops, but just for a taste of it, where you say, when you've written a play, what can a director, for example, do with or to that play? How do you feel about that? You know, are these your babies and you're very, very protective, or does it depend? Does it depend on, you know, who you're working with?
It depends. If they, I always think that at the beginning of the process, we the writers, we're top of the food chain. People are looking to us and they're asking how it's going, and is the draft ready? And they're giving us ideas. But by the end of the process or later on, we're bottom of the food chain. And you walk in the room and nobody even looks at you. I was once on a film set and Alan Bennett was there. And I did say to him, I said, oh, this must be exciting. I was very young. And he said, it's very boring, actually. but I'm paid to be here today. Because he couldn't do anything then. He couldn't do anything apart from eat the food in the trailer. That's what he could.
Yeah.
But he was a lovely man. He was a lovely, lovely man.
Do you find when your play is being, it's a bit of a broad brush this, but do you find that actually the directors don't really want you in the room when the rehearsals, for example, are taking place?
I think it depends. It just depends. Now, I work as a director myself.
Sure. Yeah.
Sometimes I always try and have the writer in the room. I always want them to be there. Sometimes there's a point where you want them to go away.
Yeah.
I work a lot with Joe Sumption, who used to be at the Dukes. And Joe was great. He was always very generous. When we came to do notes at the end of a run through or something, he would always ask me to give my notes. But it took us time, I think, for me to work out what I can say to the actors or what I can say to the company and what I have to say in private to him. I think that's the balance there. Theatre is a collaborative art, but we all have our own separate tasks in it. Yeah. Even I've worked a lot in cooperative, collective, socialist companies, but for me, they work best when people know the exact task they're doing, when they know which bit they have responsibility for.
Quite a delicate process, then, as you say, working out who you should be saying what to and how you feed back, as a director or a writer, I suppose.
Well, I think we can learn all those things, can't we? It's like we're at dress rehearsal. What can I say at dress rehearsal? That's the question, isn't it? Yeah. What do I have to give back to the company on dress rehearsal day? Yeah. That's just a professional thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, you cover a lot of ground, directing, etc. In terms of, we've talked about this in terms of, what should somebody do with a play once they've written that play? What would your advice be to somebody, if they've written a play? I'm presuming they think this is a good play. How do you then move forward so that you're able to achieve your dream, really, of getting it on the stage?
That's right, because that's what we want to do, isn't it? We want to get it on stage. I think it depends what sort of theatre writer you are, what sort of playwright you are. Do you want to hand it over and let somebody else do it? Or are you interested in setting up a company or setting up a group of people and getting it on yourself? They're for different sorts of writers. Of course, the Arts Council will give money to people. They will do that. I think we should. I used to think for many years that I couldn't go to the Arts Council because, again, I was just a kid, wasn't I? But now I know that actually the theatres need us. The Arts Council needs us. Mm. So we have things to say, and we have these really special things, these plays, and they want our ideas. They want our work, because if they didn't have them, they wouldn't be any good, would they? The everyman, the unity, they need people to make plays. And it could be you, as it says.
Okay.
But again, it's hard getting it. There's a million plays out there.
Yeah.
Sometimes, well, first, there's different ways of getting it on, aren't there? There's reading it yourself. There's reading it with your partner, if you have one, reading it with your mates. Then you go, okay, I'll get a few friends together and we'll put it on for a night somewhere. We'll put it on in my living room. Oh, okay, let's contact a venue and see if they'll do a box office split. Oh, and then you start to think, all right, let's put a little tour of 3 venues we know. Or let's do it in pubs. I know the local pub, they'll have this in the room upstairs. Mm. It's really worth trying to think of ourselves as makers, not just people with a keyboard, I think.
It's a great point. Talking about makers and plays, then we're going to do something that we haven't done before, as far as I'm aware, on our Writers on the Block. We're going to read a little bit from The Hobbit, which you adapted for the Duke's Theatre Lancaster. And you know, where we've been chatting on for a while, but I really do want to do this because I think it's going to be, you know, something that's going to spark some interest. So I think Kieran is going to share the screen, and then we're going to kind of get into this. Do you want to introduce, and we'll give this a go?
Yeah, I used to work a lot at the Duke's in Lancaster, and I wrote, I think, 6 of their summer outdoor plays. They were really interesting to write because they were promenade plays. Mm-hmm. And the whole of the audience, that's maybe 500 people, would walk from one place to another.
Yeah.
And that controlled the structure of the play. You can't have 15 scenes because there isn't time in the night for 500 people to walk to 15 different places. So you start off somewhere, and then when that scene's over, you go somewhere else. And I soon learned, oh, it's really hard to change scene, isn't it? You can't have a minute scene and then get 500 people to walk because they will spend all evening walking. So I learned so much about what a scene is and how to use location. But anyway, this is The Hobbit. Who are you going to play, Mike?
I'm Gandalf, I believe.
Yeah, okay, good. I'll read some of the stage directions, but I'll play Bilbo.
All right.
And yeah. Outside Bilbo Baggins' home. As the audience arrive, Bilbo is fleetingly seen, contentedly cleaning his windows, polishing the door handle, putting up clean curtains, tidying the grass by his front door. He goes inside, Gandalf appears.
In a hole in the ground there lives a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down or to eat. It is a hobbit hole, and that means comfort.
Good morning.
What do you mean, good morning? Do you wish me a good morning? Or mean that it is a good morning? Or that it is a morning to be good on?
I suppose all of them at once.
But I've no time for all those good mornings. I'm looking for someone to share an adventure.
Not round here, I'm afraid. We are plain, quiet folk and have no use for adventures, thank you. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things, adventures. Good morning.
Well, a lot of things you use good mornings for. Now you mean that you want to get rid of me?
Not at all, my dear sir. Only I have a fair deal of things to be getting on with.
Things? What things?
Well, spoons to be, and cushions to be, and well...
Yes?
Things. Just things. So, farewell, mister. I don't think I know your name.
But I know yours, Mr. Bilbo Baggins. And you do know mine, though you don't remember that I belong to it. I'm Gandalf, and Gandalf means me.
Gandalf? Not the wandering wizard that gave my great-great-granduncle a pair of magic cufflinks that fastened by themselves and never came undone till told. Not the fellow who used to tell such tales about dragons and goblins. I had no idea you were still in business.
What else should I be? And I'm here, Bilbo Baggins, to set you off on an adventure.
Sorry. No adventures, thank you. Not today. Busy. Good morning.
There you go again.
But come to tea any time you like. He goes back in.
An invitation to tea. Good. So it begins.
He points at the door with his staff, and a mark in Dwarvish appears upon it.
And so the hobbit, inside, keeping himself busy, is wondering whether Gandalf the Grey will return.
Shall we stop there? Is that enough?
Yeah, fine. Yeah, whatever you want.
Great.
So, Okay, you've talked about obviously what you learned in terms of the scenes and how that play was kind of put together. Just tell us a little bit more about it. I mean, that's quite a challenge, the Hobbit.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not a great Tolkien fan, but I loved working on The Hobbit. I'd forgotten until you read the first speech about the Uzi and the little Hobbit hole, but I wasn't going to start as late in the story as you can. But people in the company actually, sorry, is my internet still working? People in the company were saying,
it's okay.
Sorry. People say stories are quite short things, aren't they? They're quite compact things. But one of the members of the company in a read through said, "You've got to start with the first lines of the book. That's what everybody expects."
Right.
And I thought, oh, that's interesting, isn't it? That the decision about how the play starts is made before they even come into the room, before they come into the space. And I think it was right. I think I had to start with those lines, although I wasn't going to.
There's a lot of action going on. I mean, further on as we read into that, with all the other characters, the dwarfs that come into it. I mean, if you take the one we referenced before, the man who left is not the man who came home. Very few characters in that to something this big. Was it? I don't presume to know, but in terms of dealing with a lot of characters, how challenging is that to try and keep all of that kind of in your head, that everybody has a role to play as well?
I always think that actors are clever, but writers are more clever, because an actor just has to, they've just got to do the motivation and the journey of that one character. But as writers, you're right, we have to keep them all, don't we? In my head, I've got to be, when I'm writing, I've got to be Gandalf, I've got to be Dwalin, I've got to be Bilbo, I've got to be everybody. I've got to know how they all think and feel.
You won awards for the adaptation. Why do you feel that was so successful?
It had a great designer on it.
Right. Okay.
To be honest, I can't remember his name, but it did what outdoor visual theatre should do. It had lots of visual spectacle, and the designer helped the director and the writer tell the story. We were all telling the story together. The costumes told the story. They told the journey of the character, as well as the scenes. But I think sometimes we just get lucky, don't we?
Yeah.
Sometimes it just works, doesn't it? Every time we want it to work. I work. I quite like fun, and I quite like having a laugh about theatre and in the rehearsal room. I really like having a good time, but I'm also deadly serious. I do try and write the best play in the world.
Yeah.
That's my target. Of course, that's meaningless nonsense. What I have to do is write the most coherent characters on the most interesting journeys. But I think we have to believe that we're writing something which is really good.
I'm just quite aware the time is kind of moving on, and we do have some questions from the audience. And I want to preface one with just referring to the play that you wrote, which you were commissioned to write at the early part of lockdown, which is I've kind of lost its full title now, The Girl and the Raccoon title.
Girl, Her Mum and the Raccoon with No Name.
Yes. So you were commissioned to write that at the early stage of lockdown. And someone has put a question up saying, how will theatre continue to adapt the current situation with COVID, loss of income? Do you think it will inspire new ways to perform and watch plays? So maybe we can combine that with, this was early in the optimistic days of the lockdown, if you want to call it that, when we were all clapping and, kind of, it was quite, in the summer in the UK anyway. So, I mean, tell us about your thoughts going into that, and maybe then some of this stuff around how theatre might adapt to the current situation with COVID, if you don't mind.
Okay, I can't control COVID. I think the government and their scientists, they have to sort that out for us. I think we still have to keep writing stories, either about COVID or about all the other things, we as writers. And believe that we will go, but I have to believe that we'll go back to watch things live, because I believe that we have to assemble. We as human beings, we need to go into spaces together. I think so. I think, yeah, that's what we do. That's why I like theatre, because I go there with a lot of people who I've never met before to experience the same thing as them. That's exciting. That's political for me, that I can meet with a bunch of strangers and I can laugh with them.
Would you say your theatre has also, sorry, carry on. Sorry, my apologies, carry on.
No, after you. No, after you. After you.
Well, you used the word political. I wanted to ask because, I mean, you know, the time that we're in at the moment, as you say, we can't control the virus, but it's a very political time in many senses. Do you think does your work have would you argue that it has a political edge? And do you think the theatre will play, you know, a role in helping people make sense, you know, when we come out of this, of what we've been through and what we might be going through afterwards?
Yeah, I think this is why in many parts of the world they ban theatres. We take it a bit for granted over here. I think theatre is a fantastic thing for having a great time at. I love it. That we can go there and we can laugh and we can hear that fantastic singing and all that sort of stuff. But in many parts of the world, they ban theatre because they know it's where people with things to say it. And that's their job. We have to look at the world and write about it. And it's about the world out there sometimes, or it's about the world in here. You know, it all needs telling. That's what we have to do. And I think I have no doubt that theatre will happen again, that companies will go into schools, and that open air theatre is probably going to be the first sort of theatre to come back.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, I do kind of think that, or do wonder, you know, that you know, once we are kind of all back out and about again, whether it might be, you know, sometimes, you know, you only miss something when you actually lose it, in a sense, you know, that communal kind of, you know, social being that we all are. And I really hope theatre benefits from that, the idea that people want to, you know, engage in that way. Question?
Go on, ask a question, sorry.
No, you carry on. I've got another question I'm going to come on to in a moment. Sorry.
I sometimes think I can't remember what theatre was like.
Mm.
So long ago. This time last year, I had a play in rehearsals, the Man Who Left, and it went out on tour, and it stopped halfway through tour. Wow. And it was sort of gut wrenching, really, having spent 4 or 5 years on it.
Yeah. And have you? I mean, you put the one on that we talked about the girl, the mother of raccoon with no name, which was online and is online. Do you think that there are some benefits of actually, you know, writing for theatre that is purely online?
I think there are. I think some people like it. I'm not a great fan myself, mainly because the sound quality is so poor. Yeah. I miss the sound of theatre. Really miss it.
I mean, so many kind of elements of production that you just cannot recreate.
And actually, you know, tonight, what am I going to do? Am I going to watch a theatre company putting on a play, or am I going to watch one of those fantastic films on iPlayer or Netflix? The play it's got to be a good play, and it has to be well filmed to take me away from The Handmaid's Tale or Call My Agent or whatever.
I was watching Call My Agent last night. I mean, one of the things when you look at these, I think you're right. When you look at these box sets, the amount of money, the production quality and values in these is astonishing, isn't it? Really?
And that's why, as theatre writers, we have to do something different.
Yes.
We cannot write film plays and put them on the stage, because I'm sorry, but MGM does it better than any theatre you know is ever going to do it. We have to write theatre plays for theatre spaces. That's what I believe anyway. That's how I work.
I think one thing a play can do that very rarely can be done on film. I mean, some of the best productions I've seen have been with virtually no props whatsoever. You know, and I've very rarely seen that in terms of film, which, you know, for me gives you that power of the live interactive. In fact, I don't know if you know the play Not About Heroes by Stephen MacDonald. I saw that back in the early 90s in the Citizens Theatre in Glasgow with two actors, hardly any, we were in the round, hardly any props. And it stuck with me for years and years and years. And then it was put on at a theatre in Liverpool a couple of years back, and they just overproduced it, the company that was doing it, you know, and it almost destroyed it for me, really, because the power of the language within that play, I thought, was so strong. It needed very little to carry it, you know. There's a question here. What's been your most challenging writing commission?
I wrote a play for two theatre companies. It was a co-production, and the two companies wanted different things. I often say that I don't write plays for people, but I will write plays with people. For me, making sure that all the people in the team want the same thing, the same sort of thing, then it works. If I write something and actually the director isn't very keen on it, that's when it gets painful.
But right with the two companies became quite a...
It was horrible. It was horrible. It was horrible.
Has that kind of changed you in terms of how you accept commissions, or, you know?
I just try and set up the relationships properly at the beginning, get the contract right, talk to them about what do you want? What do you really want? Do you want an avant-garde political piece? Do you want a funny piece? Is it really about this? Can I use 7 actors? Is it, you know, just tell them the stuff so they will buy into it. Sometimes I feel I need to take the other people along with my idea, or I have to go along with theirs.
Yeah.
Oh, but actually the hardest one is always the one I'm writing now, because that one isn't finished. That's the one I'm struggling with, isn't it? Yeah.
And what's been your most satisfactory, if you like? I mean, because I could say what's been your best, and it might be a big award, but what's been your most satisfactory experience for yourself in terms of your writing and your achievements, or whichever you want to reference, really?
I like theatre as an event. So we're not watching a play, we're going to an event. And I made a play called The Iranian Feast, which was based on when I went to Iran and saw theatre there and met lots of people and worked with Iranian theatre makers. And then came back and made a play, and it was for village halls. And in the evening, people came to an evening where they were the guests of an Iranian family, and the Iranian family cooked food for everybody in the audience. I've been making plays with food for 35, 40 years now. But we made a feast, and the food was connected to the story. And it was a story about hospitality, and it was a story about how the family had to leave Iran because the girl had been on demonstrations and the dad worked in the secret police.
Right.
So we had a family in dispute because the girl was a demonstrator and her dad was secret police. And at the same time, we were making fantastic Persian food. I liked it. It seemed like total theatre on the small amount of money that we had. It was great.
I think it's amazing. I mean, I'm salivating at the thought of it, to be honest with you. But I like that what you say there about theatre as an event. And I suppose in a way, the food, and I noticed this is a theme because in the man who left, he's making pancakes. I think the squaddiers people are coming in. Do you think that's almost a way of, and maybe it's not meant this way, but it's almost like tricking the mindset of the people who are coming into the space? You know, you go back to what you said about when you were seeing plays when you were young, and it was drawing rooms, and it was a very static and stage thing, and it was, you know, there's that very reverential type of thing. Do you think that is partly you're learning from that, if you like, in terms of how you want people to understand this medium?
Well, I think food is often connected with love, isn't it? You know, when we go abroad and people invite us into their houses and show us that fantastic hospitality, I think I do use it in that way. The audience come in, you offer them food. It's like saying to them, I'm glad you're here with us, we are together. I'm right in the middle of making a play called The Syrian Baker, where we will make bread. A Syrian family will make bread, and we will break bread together. It's about making a community. I think I'm interested in that.
And that's, I think that, you know, what we were talking about before at the end of these lockdowns, that will be a very symbolic thing. The idea, won't it, of breaking the bread, inviting people in,
yeah,
community together.
Yes.
Okay, just before. Sorry.
So that play should have gone on last autumn, and the choice was: do we rewrite it in a different form? Do we take all the food out? Do we make it COVID safe? Or do we keep working on the play and wait till a time when we can make it the way we should? That's the producer's choice. And me, the writer, I'm just the victim of the producer's choice, to be honest.
Okay. So look, just before we finish, we're a little bit over time. I don't want to finish on this question, another one from the audience. It's about your practice, really. For you, what are the practical steps to writing a play? You know, so what works for you as a writing practice?
I'm very lucky that I have connections with some theatre companies, and I co-run a theatre company. It's important as a playwright to have those sort of connections. But as a writer, is it Ian McEwan who said, I have to make a date with the desk. I just have to sit at the desk and get on with it, really. That's at the heart of my practice. And the other one is I try and find the question that will unlock the answer. I will talk about this again as we in other parts of this residency. Finding the right question will give you the right answer. When you're stuck, if you're blocked, if something isn't working, just find the right question. I really believe that. That's my method. That's just me.
Well, everyone has their own method, but in a way that goes back to what you said earlier. What is the job? You have to turn up to work. Make a date with the desk. It isn't going to write itself, type of thing, is it? And I think, you know, for anyone who writes, that the inspiration can come whilst you're tackling the job, in a sense, rather than sitting around waiting for the inspiration to suddenly appear.
A writer I know called John Morehouse, a very fine writer, he said, I don't believe in writer's block. He said, if I offered you £100, you'd get it written by lunchtime. That's
well, yeah.
And he also said, John Morehouse says, if I wait for the conditions to be right before I start writing, I will never write. He said, I write plays when I'm watching my son playing footy on a Saturday morning. So that he's an inspiration to me, is John Morehouse.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. And, you know, I think, as you say, it's a good moment to bring this introduction to an end, because these are the things in many ways that are going to be partly discussed in the residency, in the range of things that you're going to be doing in that. So first off, I mean, I want to say thanks. I've really, really enjoyed the conversation, enjoyed chatting to you on the phone the other day. And we feel very, very honoured that, you were doing this residency. And, in the sense that, you have such a depth of work and a range of work that you've done. But also there's a real generosity that comes across from you, Kevin, in terms of wanting to share that with people and to engage with people, to offer obviously support to them as part of their writing as well. And I think that's fantastic, to hear that and to feel that as well. I think people are going to get an awful lot out of the residency. So thank you very, very much for doing this. And I'm just going to run through a couple of things that Kevin is going to be doing. So we have a workshop on structure on the 2nd of March. We have Enterprise Hub, where Kevin's going to be talking about making a living as an artist on the 4th of March. We have a workshop on verbatim theatre. Funny I should stumble over that word, verbatim theatre, on the 10th of March. And we have an open house on the 11th of March. And then we finish with the block party, where Kevin will read his creative response to this residency, which is on the 12th of March. There are also one-to-one sessions that you can book in, where you can share some of your work with Kevin, he'll give you feedback and have discussion with you about your work as well. And all of those things we found from past residencies, and no doubt will be the same with this one, are incredibly valuable to all of the writers out there who engage with this. You're welcome to come, whether you're a writer or not, to any of these Bloc socials. They're all free events that we offer as part of Writing on the Wall and the Writers Block. So, please book on, get your tickets for the events, come along. That it's going to be absolutely fantastic, and you will get a huge amount out of it. I just want to finish by just plugging another event, which we have in partnership with the Irish Festival with Tony Bertel, which is his book, A Hidden History, the Irish Language in Liverpool. That's on Thursday, the 4th of March at 6 o'clock. All the details can be found on our website, which is writingonthewall.org.uk. I want to thank Kevin. I've already thanked Kevin. I also want to thank our staff who've made this made possible. I also want to finish by just saying, from our point of view as Writing on the Wall, because the Writers' Block has played a huge role in this. We were very, very proud of the Liverpool City Region Culture and Creativity Awards on Friday evening to be awarded Arts Organisation of the Year. And, we feel, in compliments to our staff and our trustees and all of our supporters, we wouldn't achieve that that we have. And it's particularly gratifying to be acknowledged in our 21st anniversary. And obviously, we hope to be able to be doing it for many years to come. So thank you so much for attending tonight's introduction to our new writer on the block, playwright Kevin Dyer. We look forward to seeing you at the events over the next couple of weeks that Kevin will be presenting. Thank you. Good night.